So what do you need to know in Excel in 2021? If you're anything like me, you might follow a few people on LinkedIn talking about Excel. Everybody's talking about different stuff, aren't they? Power BI, some people like me talking about VBA, new formulae, dynamic arrays, all kinds of stuff. But my theory really is all of that is interesting, but can be counterproductive. It's counterproductive because it can be intimidating, discouraging at least to people like you who are trying to learn Excel, trying to improve their skills, trying to save time, trying to make sense of data. So in this series, I'm simplifying everything for you. I'm opening up my order book from the past 2 or 3 years, and I've actually reviewed 30 projects, gone through them, and looked at exactly the techniques I used on these projects. On that basis, I am presenting to you your Excel toolkit for 2021. This is exactly the stuff I use. I get massive value out of it personally, and my customers do. You know, it's the reason I have a business. I know you can do the same in 2021. We'll get started with all that in just a second. If you're in the chat, can you let me know if you can see and hear me? And Jasmine is already in there. Jasmine, thank you very much. If you're watching on replay, then go ahead, just skip through this bit, but we're going to say hello to everybody who's with us today. So welcome, Vinay. How are you doing, Vinay? You were with us yesterday too. So thanks so much for supporting us. And I hope you got some value out of the series. Shane is with us, tuning in from Wisconsin. Fantastic stuff. Yeah, it's already dark outside here in the UK, just outside my office, already dark. Good to see you, Shane. Haven't seen you for a little while. Let me know how you've been doing. Steve is listening in the car. Steve, I don't know if I can advocate this generally, so keep your eyes on the road, and if you get too excited, make sure you pull over. Steve listening in the car there, fantastic stuff. And DC tuning in, welcome DC, good to see you again. And Klaus, how are you doing? Good to have you with us today. So we're looking at Toolkit today. So let me just remind you what we've done, because it is important. The first day, we looked at context. So what kind of people are using Excel? And as I said, I opened up my order book, and we're taking a set of projects I did over the past 3 years, about 30 projects. And the idea for this series is that they're representative generally of what people are doing in Excel. So we've got small organizations in there, one-person band organizations, all the way up to big corporates, companies with millions of dollars turnover to companies with under 100,000, public sector, private sector. Broadly representative, I would say, of the economy. So we've got a sample, yeah? And it might be a small sample, and yeah, there's certainly bias in there, but at least there's a sample. There's some evidence. There's so many people out there on YouTube, LinkedIn saying you should be doing this in Excel, but why are they saying it? Yeah. And at least with me, I'll explain to you why this is my point of view. So I'm trying to justify the points of view. So we looked at the context first. In that context, what are people doing? Yesterday, we talked about the 4 applications of Excel. Yes, I want you to start thinking about the applications of Excel. What are you doing? Whatever you're doing, whether you're analyzing data, storing data, automating a process. I've just given you 3 of the applications. You're doing one of the 4 applications of Excel. Now, knowing these applications and being kind of deliberate about which application you're doing, that's going to inform your choice of tool. That's going to de-stress the process and allow you to get more done in Excel. What are the 4 applications? Data input, data analysis, forgotten the third one, modeling, and automation. So we talk about 4 applications. So we've got the 4 applications. Then the question is, what are the tools? What's in our toolkit for each application? Yeah. So if you know which application, okay, then what am I going to use? So today we're actually getting into the tools and techniques that are in my toolkit and that I recommend you have in your Excel toolkit. And I'll also get a bit controversial today. I'll touch on a few things that I don't think you need necessarily in your Excel toolkit. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't learn these things. Yeah, learning is a good thing. And you've seen on the channel, we do all kinds of stuff, like DC's in the chat, and DC followed us trying to build a chess computer in Excel, for example. You know, we're not going to commercialize that, clearly. It's a learning thing. So I'm not saying you shouldn't learn things for the sake of learning. I'm saying you shouldn't stress when someone says that you have to know Power Query, or that you have to know the indirect formula, which is something I use. Yeah. You need a relatively small subset of tools. Don't get distracted by what everyone else is saying. Stay in your lane and get your work done. So with that said, here's my disclaimer. You might be surprised by what I recommend. It's only my approach, yeah, but it is based on hundreds of completed projects. That's what I want you to bear in mind when people are telling you about Excel and what you need to know and don't need to know. What's their experience? What's their perspective? What's their agenda? It's based on hundreds of completed projects. I'm happy to share it, but ultimately what you do, is up to you. As I said, I'm in my lane, very happy doing what I'm doing, but I'm sharing as openly as I can what's been working for me. But yeah, you're welcome to disagree. Go ahead and prove me wrong. Welcome to Ian Reef, by the way, just dropping in. Good, so let's get started. So we've got 4 applications, and let's jump into our first one, which is data inputs. And we've said yesterday, it doesn't sound particularly kind of sexy, does it? Data input. When we're thinking about Excel on YouTube, people must be doing automation or Power Query, something really exciting. But the truth is, and this is anecdotal, but I think over 90% of spreadsheets are just concerned with data inputs. Yeah. And I'll go ahead and say 100% of spreadsheets, or maybe 99%, have some element of data input going on. What is data input? Well, very simply, what's the first thing you do in Excel? You open up a file, click on a cell, and then type something in. There, you're doing data input. So it's a very fundamental thing. We can't get away from it. Whenever we're using Excel, we're likely to be doing data input. And people are often storing data with Excel. How many spreadsheets do you have on your computer just with a little bit of data in? I set up a couple of new files today just to store, 12 rows of data, whatever it might be. So basic data input and storage is the most common, not the most sexy maybe, but the most common usage of Excel. So I'm suggesting you can be smart by learning some skills about how to do it. And here comes the controversy. Yeah. When people think of data input, they often think must be user forms. Chris must be talking about user forms. And, just to get it out of the way, I have videos on user forms. Yeah. On the channel, got a very popular series, over 1 million views, I think. Excel VBA user forms for beginners. And it's great to learn. Do you need user forms? No, you don't. And increasingly in my career, I've moved away from user forms. Can you believe that? I've moved away from user forms. And last year I did a project for the English Institute of Sport here in the UK, and they wanted an input mechanism. So I thought, great, user forms. So knocked up a user form, and user form has that visual impact. So clients tend to love it. But then what happened? Got an email from the client 2 or 3 weeks later. And she said, I tried to present with this spreadsheet, flashed up the user form on a projector in the meeting, and the user form didn't display properly. That was really bad news. That was bad news for her. That was bad news for me as a consultant as well. The tool I provided didn't really work. And there's been these display issues recently with user forms if you're using multiple monitors. And that's one of the things that has kind of pushed me further away from user forms, but they just require a lot of coding as well, just quite a lot of infrastructure, putting additional objects into the workbook. So yeah, they're cool. Learn them for learning's sake, but you don't need them. So don't let anybody convince you or make you feel inadequate because you can't use user forms. And VBA, once again, I'm being a massive contradiction, the walking or the sitting contradiction today. I'm saying you don't need VBA. Yeah, we love VBA, and VBA is good for automation. If you want to automate the process, then you're going to need VBA, but not if you're doing data input. Yeah. So don't listen to me when I'm saying you need VBA all the time. So I'm inviting you to take a simpler approach and then to use some of the tools available in Excel to help you do data input. So what do you need? In my opinion, for doing data input, cell validation. Are you using basic cell validation in your spreadsheets? I can tell straight away when I look at a client file, has cell validation been used? If cell validation has been used, you're going to have high data quality, high data quality. So that means the word validation, if it was spelled differently, you would have low data quality. Yeah, someone's spelt it incorrectly. Someone might have put a space at the end of the word. These are all common things that detract from data quality. If you have low data quality, it's more difficult to do. We'll be coming to this later. It's more difficult to do analysis. So using cell validation helps us speed up the data input and improves data quality. What do we mean by cell validation? Well, the most popular form of cell validation is to have a drop-down menu. Yeah, drop-down menu. You can put some entries somewhere on another sheet, set up the drop-down menu. Alt-AVV. Alt-AVV is the Windows shortcut to get the drop-down menu. And that means the user has to choose from the entries in the menu. So that gives us control. We know what's going to come into the spreadsheet. And just as an aside, people are always really impressed with drop-down menus as well. So I always recommend you learn how to do a drop-down menu because it's a bit of a wow factor for people to see it in a spreadsheet. So I've got cell validation. Just a couple more things I'll throw in at this point, because when you've got the cell validation dialog box up, you'll notice a couple of other things in there. And I want you to check this out. Like, I'm not going to open Excel today because I know if I open Excel, I'm going to go way off track and we're going to run way over time. But just open Excel and go to the data validation menu. So it's under data validation, Alt-AVV. And then just look at a few of the options there. These are underused and they're super useful. So you've got the option of an input message there, an input message. So that means when somebody selects the cell, a little message is going to flash up. So there you can use that to guide the user, to provide some information from the user about what to put in this cell. So you've got input message as well. You've also got another option in there, which is your error message, So cell validation, if somebody types something in that can't go in the cell, what message are you going to flash up to make sure that they understand what they can put in the cell? Yeah, we're trying to create a smooth experience for the user. We're trying to build our applications around the needs of the user. Not around what's in our toolkit or around what somebody on LinkedIn has told me I need to know. Build it around the needs of the user. You'll find you're using the simpler tools in Excel and you're going to discover a few new ones as well. Other forms of cell validation. One I often use is date validation. So dates in Excel, let me know in the comments. Have you been struggling with dates in Excel? Everybody has had a struggle with dates in Excel. Okay, so you can get started on the right foot by going to that data validation, going to dates and controlling how data are inputted into the cell. That's a pretty cool thing to be able to do. And there's other forms of cell validation as well. So yeah, a simple thing, underused thing, but delivers a lot of value for the user. It's going to make things easier for you or whoever is using your spreadsheet. So you need cell validation, helpful formatting. Absolutely. So I've already mentioned user forms. My strategy these days, and I was speaking to somebody today about this. This is how relevant this content is, guys. I was speaking to someone today about this, and somebody was asking me, one of our members actually was asking me, I want to do some input, how should I do it? Do it in the spreadsheet, yeah? But use helpful formatting to give the feel of a form, yeah? So it will feel a bit like a user form, but it won't actually be a user form. But you can create the same kind of aesthetic just using the spreadsheet and using formatting. Yeah. So helpful formatting gives us the feeling of a form that's going to make people want to engage. It's going to help you engage with your data. There's other things you can do with formatting as well. So highlighting important cells, maybe the first cell where the user's got to input data, you could highlight that one yellow. I don't recommend highlighting lots of cells yellow, but having one cell highlighted yellow, start here, that can be useful. Helpful formatting, focused on the user experience. Now we're talking. Then finally, I've put this in the needed column. It's not absolutely necessary, to be honest with you, but it's so helpful. I put it in the needed column. Protection, cell protection. So you want the user to be able to tab through your form, although it's not really a form, it's actually just in the spreadsheet, to be able to tab through it by hitting the tab key. How about that? We want to be able to do data input in a supported fashion without using the mouse. Yeah. To be able to write in or select from the drop-down menu, Alt and down arrow, by the way, to select from the drop-down menu using the keyboard, and to be able to do that without having to use the mouse. Now, you can only create that effect, if you like, by protecting the cells that don't have data inputted to them. Yeah. So if it's not a cell that the user has to interact with, we're going to protect that cell. Yeah. So under the review tab, and then on the formatting settings for the cell, you can control if it's locked or not. That's going to allow us to control if the user can select that cell. If the user can't select that cell, then it's not going to be on a tab option. So that if you hit the tab key, it's not going to go to that cell. When you hit tab, it's going to tab through all of the unlocked cells. Also a really cool thing to be able to do. I think it's so cool. I've put it in the needed column. So by combining those three together, cell validation, helpful formatting, and cell protection, you can create a very smooth user experience. And I really want you to go and try this, because I tried it. It simplified my life immensely. My clients loved it. And it meant I didn't need to use user forms, which meant I didn't need to do VBA, and I didn't have to bring all of this risk into the project by using a user form and using VBA. You can get a very, very nice effect by using these techniques if you're doing data input. And don't forget, data input is the #1 thing, for better or for worse, that Excel is used for. So big welcome to everybody. The Barker House is with us today. Tony Barker, how are you doing, Tony? Good to see you. Jasvin, I think it's good to know what Excel can do better to be able to explain the problem. You'll find help around that, and definitely don't need fancy formulas. Yeah, I think there's something of a formula obsession, and Jasvin knows me well. One of my pet hates is long Excel formulae. Oh, you know, there seems to be like this, a status symbol for some people to have a very long Excel formula. It's really long and it works. Okay. Again, I'm not diminishing your achievement of getting a complicated piece of logic to work. Great. But I'm going to be straight with you. It's bad for the spreadsheet. It's bad for your sanity. It's bad for the person who's going to debug your spreadsheet in a year's time when they have to get a consultant in to sort them out. Might be somebody like me. Short formulae, yeah, multiple short formulae work better for a number of reasons we won't get into than a single long formula. Stuart, you're with us today. Thanks for your nice comments yesterday, Stuart, by the way. Really appreciate that. Stuart says, I use a Mac and user forms have some VBA functionality are slightly different. I have found other ways to use it. Yeah, good. I mean, thinking about user forms, they bring a number of risks with them. And PC versus Mac operation and display is another one of those risks. Excellent. A good one here from Jasmine as well. Cell validation or proper user instructions. You know, one thing I should have put in the toolkit somewhere, or it's kind of an add-on, but a really good one, is to be able to do video walkthroughs. Do video walkthroughs for your customer. Yeah, people just love it. So if you send them your Excel file, here's the file, give it a go. Here's a video walkthrough. Yeah. Without exception, my customers love the video walkthroughs, and it's just kind of reassuring for them to be able to see someone click through the file and to know that they're not doing anything wrong. So good shout there from Jasvin and Henrik. Welcome, Henrik. How are you doing? 15 people watching today. Fantastic. And a few likes as well. If you smash the like button, that does help the stream be a little bit optimized in terms of the algorithm, apparently. So I'd love it if you did that, but I hope you're getting some value anyway. Other helpful things with data input, yep, cell input guidance. So that could be in the form of having some information typed into the cell next door, could be in the form of an input message. We've already mentioned data validation gives us the option of an input message. Using the if formula, yeah. So if there isn't an entry in this cell, having an if formula in the cell next door to say, you've got to fill out that cell, that's also a really cool thing to do. You know, when the user can see a judicious amount of helpful text to help them do the input, that's a good thing. Using the if formula, you can make the text display. Once the input is done, then the text disappears. Love it. Then finally, yeah, VBA for buttons, VBA for data transfer. So this is the other part of my go-to toolkit for data input, is to use a bit of VBA to move the data around. Yeah, typically the customer wants to do some data input and then move it to a data set somewhere else in Excel, or maybe to a different file. So I've just found creating an input form on the spreadsheet, not using a user form, just on the spreadsheet, then having a button there, click, and it's going to send all the data to another sheet in the file. That's worked very well for me. And the VBA to do that is not too complicated. You can code that. You could almost record that code and get it working. Also VBA for buttons. So having a few buttons on the form can be helpful. Now, your user should be accustomed to a few interactive features if you've done things like drop-down menus, so it won't be totally alien to them to having some buttons or some interactive features on the form. So having a button can allow users to, I have a button, for example, just to input yes or no, yeah, because clicking a button is even faster than using a drop-down menu. So consider the role of buttons. Can you put some buttons in? Where else have I used buttons on a form? Yes, I've used buttons where if you've got inputs that are optional, yeah? So if you have input A, we want input X and Y to display, but if you have input B, we don't want input X and Y to display. Where you have optional inputs, you could have a button on the form saying display these boxes or hide these boxes. So yeah, so having a few buttons on there with some VBA-based functionality can just make it super slick and optimize that user experience as far as possible. So that's my toolkit for data input. Not too controversial, I hope. And disclaimer at the bottom, this is only my approach. Yeah, only my approach. I am advocating it based on the evidence that I've presented in this series. You can go back to yesterday's stream or the stream before. And what I'm saying is make sure you listen to people who are experienced and are at least explaining why they're advocating what they're advocating. Good. Any further questions, guys, on this one? Adil is with us. Hello from Toronto, Canada. Thanks for the great lessons. Thank you, Adil. Good to see you with us. And let me just quickly remind you that this Friday at 7 o'clock, we have our first birthday party. This is our first birthday party for our membership program. So if you like hanging out, chatting with me like this, you're going to love Members Monday. We have a weekly live stream with me. We've got some of our members in the chat today. Weekly live stream with me, a community page, a content navigator to help you navigate the previous live streams, a live stream library as well, where you've got access to about 100 live streams in there now. So all kinds of stuff with Members Monday. It's just a great way for you to make progress. How do I get rid of this picture? There we go. It's a great way for you to make progress. We've been going a year. That's why it's the first birthday. We've been going a year and we've had so many people get fantastic results. So we're going to be relaunching our membership program this Friday, 1900 UK time, bit of a party. We're going to have some members coming on, going to give away membership. It's going to be fun. So I'd love to see you there. Good. So we're talking about data input today. Let's also talk briefly, back to the slideshow here. Let's also talk briefly about data analysis. So what are you using for data analysis? Let me deal with Vinay's questions here quickly. Vinay is saying, do we have some sample data input in further? Do you mean the sample data that I've used for this study, Vinay? I think you do. If you go back to Monday, I explained about the sample data and about the context on Monday's stream. I can't share much more because it's all clients. It's all about clients. So anyway, the main information, the main features, the main attributes of the organizations you can find on Monday's stream. Good. So data analysis. So again, let's deal with the controversy first. Yeah. So needed, helpful, not needed. You're welcome to disagree. Okay. Not needed. Pivot tables and Power Query. What? Are you kidding me? Everybody's talking about Power Query. What is this? Click off, dislike, off you go. Okay, see you later. If you want to know what a practicing Excel consultant working with organizations large and small, who's made a living out of it for 10 years, who's been teaching on YouTube and has 5 million views or so, just listen to what I've got to say. For the vast majority of data analysis tasks in Excel, you're not going to need Power Query. Okay, and you can go back to Monday's stream where we spoke about data set size. Don't want any of that. Data set size, of course. And most people have small data sets, less than 1,000 rows, often, that they need to do some kind of analysis on. So we don't need to be, starting up Power Query every time to do this. Okay. And a lot of people are in the situation where it's been recommended to them and they're using it, but it's like they've got a tool that's way too powerful for the job, really. Yeah. And for the vast majority of data analysis tasks, you don't need a Power Query. Disclaimer, it's good to learn it. Yeah. And learning is great. It doesn't mean you need it. Just because you know it doesn't mean that you have to use it. Pivot tables. I'm going there, guys. I don't use pivot tables anymore. What? No pivot tables? Seriously, yeah. I had a situation a couple of years ago with a customer. This was 2018, I think, late 2018. Wanted an analysis doing, financial data, about 5,000 rows of transactions that the company on the company bank account, wanted to analyze it, get it into shape for accounts, fairly typical stuff. And I said, listen, pivot tables, we can do this very quickly. And my customer said, we don't like pivot tables. And I said, well, we can do it quickly. And I can train you to use pivot tables. I'll do you some videos. And my customer said, no, we really don't want pivot tables. Okay. And somebody else said the same thing to me. Yeah. So you can be bringing in these power tools in Excel. Yeah. But they're bringing a lot of junk with them. Yeah. They're putting a lot of infrastructure in the file that you don't necessarily need. People don't like interacting with the pivot table interface. Well, some people probably do out there. I do, because I've had a bit of experience with it, but the average punter doesn't want to do that. Okay. So you might not need pivot tables. Anyway, that's the end of my controversy there. So what do you need? And I'm going to go through the actual toolkit I use for when I'm doing data analysis. And this I use for small data sets, but up to data sets of 2,000 or 3,000 rows. Just today, I was analyzing a data set of 25,000 rows using these tools. Data analysis formulae. One of my Excel secret weapons. Underrated. Yeah, underrated. So here I'm talking about things like sum ifs, average ifs, and particularly the one thing you have to learn is dsum. Like, please try and learn dsum. Dsum is like a pivot table without all of the pivot table infrastructure and the interface. It's the power of a pivot table in a formula. Yeah. All of the dashboards I build using dsum. So you just have the columns, the column headers, and then give the user a drop-down menu to choose criteria for each column. Bang, 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 and dsum returns the answer you're looking for. Data analysis formulae, highly recommended. Cell validation is going to help you there. When you're using dsum, having a drop-down menu is essential, because a drop-down menu is going to limit the entries that can go in. If we can control the entries that can come into the spreadsheet, that means we can avoid errors. So cell validation goes into the needed column for me. Again, helpful formatting is just really going to help for the same reasons as it does with data input. It's going to help the user understand what's going on. Then finally, for numerical analysis, the frequency formula. I've got 3 Excel secret weapons, yeah? One of them is dsum, and the second one is frequency. And the third one, let me know in the chat if you know the third one. Frequency. It's like nobody uses frequency, but so many people out there are analyzing numerical data sets, yeah? For example, my brother, it wasn't a paid project, this one. My brother came to me a couple of years ago. We run half marathons together, and we finished right in the middle. Yeah, pretty average. Story of my life. Average performance. And my brother said, yeah, I want to know how our performance compares to everybody else. So we had a continuous numerical data set. Yeah, times from 1 hour to 4 hours, times like 1 hour 57.22, those kinds of numbers. So we need Excel to create bins with a lower bounds and upper bounds and drop each entry into a bin and then count how many entries are in each bin. Numerical data analysis. You'll be surprised How many people struggle with that? Yeah. And it might be the people who use a Power Query and everything else. I don't know, but it's such a basic skill to be able to do that numerical data analysis. So frequency formula, I use it all the time. In addition, in the helpful column, we have indirect and offset. Indirect, controversial choice. Yeah, I know some people in the chat like, indirect what? Controversial. These are volatile formulae. Volatile formulae. That means that they're going to place a calculation load on Excel that might slow it down. So we're going to use them sparingly. Yeah, and I'm only suggesting you use a handful. Maybe a dozen to half a dozen, but indirect and offset get you dynamic functionality. Dynamic functionality combined with a drop-down menu and count if that Ian Reeve has just mentioned in the chat. Good job. You can get the dynamic function you need to select part of a data set. Yeah. So with those financial transactions I was talking about, the client wanted to be able to look at just at January, just at February, just at March. I said, let's use a pivot table. The client was like, no, we don't want pivot tables. So what did I do? I used indirect. Yeah, it was indirect I used. And indirect sorted the data and then used indirect to locate the specific data range for each month. So all the customer had was a drop-down menu with the months, and then in the background, indirect and offset were doing the heavy lifting. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm not hating on everything that's new in Excel. I love the unique formula. I've got to be honest. It's been in Excel a couple of years, but the unique formula gives us unique entries in a list. So it's excellent for data cleansing. If you get a data set, you want to understand what entries are in this list, and you want to do things like picking out duplicates and stuff. Yeah, Power Query is useful for that. If you want to fire a Power Query, fine. Don't want to argue about it anymore. But unique helps us do that. I have been using unique formula. Thank you, Microsoft, for bringing in the unique formula. And then VBA helps us create analyses and also just good overall file design. Yeah. Good overall file design is really going to help with all of these really, but particularly with data analysis. So having the data set on one sheet, having a dashboard on or the analysis on another sheet, having a background sheet, an engine sheet where you can put your workings on, your indirect workings, for example, having a clear role for each sheet, and our applications of Excel, understanding the applications is going to help you do that. That's just a generally helpful thing to do. With data analysis, we often have lots of things interacting, a data set, a dashboard. So we've got to be thinking about the overall file design. So there we go, 21 people watching and a few likes. So thanks very much, guys. And let me know, controversial. I can't see too much controversy in the chat. So DC saying, pivot tables tend to be more for the analyst. I use them constantly, but rarely use them in end products. Yeah, good shout there from DC. That's a point I should have made. What you do for yourself is a different question to creating spreadsheet files for other people. And over the years, this has become crystal clear to me. I create files for other people. That means a different set of tools are going to work. Yeah. If you're doing stuff for yourself, then really, it really is kind of up to you what you use. You know, I think you're still going to benefit from this presentation. But I would always say, I know DC would agree with this, I think anyway, I would always say, you want your work to have real world impact. Yeah. So even if you're building something for yourself, you're going to want to show that to somebody at some point, and then maybe they want to use it. Yeah. And then maybe somebody else wants a project for you, and suddenly you might have a little Excel freelancing career going. So if you're not using tools that are easily used and widely available, you're probably limiting the impact of your work. That would be my argument for practicing with this toolkit. Ian Reeve, I cannot see index and match used together to find a data set based on two criteria, date and time, stored in separate columns. Not absolutely sure what you mean there, Ian, but yeah, I'd say using indirect and offset gives us that dynamic function. So if we want to look at just part of a data set, that's what indirect and offset can help us do. COUNTIF, yeah, COUNTIF is one of my data analysis formulae. I don't know if I mentioned it, but absolutely good stuff. Yeah, and DC says unique is really awesome. Absolutely. And DC says, yeah, also, yeah, the other cool formulae that have come in the past couple of years, filter, sort, and XLOOKUP becoming more widely available, aren't they, DC? For me, It's still too early to start putting them into client files, but gradually as people's versions of Excel update and they're not using Excel 95 anymore, whatever they're using, we're going to be able to deploy more of those recently introduced formulae, such as XLOOKUP and indeed unique. Good stuff. Okay, thanks so much, guys. So tomorrow we're going to be pushing ahead. I'm going to tell you about the other half of the toolkit, the modeling stuff, and the automation stuff. So thanks so much for hanging out today, and I will see you tomorrow. Don't forget, Friday, Members Monday, relaunch party, 7 o'clock UK time. We're going to have a giveaway. We're going to have some members coming on. We're going to have a good time. I'll see you then.